And welcome to our webinar celebrating International Women's Day. I am joined by some absolutely fantastic speakers today, and I'm really looking forward to getting into some really interesting questions and hearing more about their experiences across their career, but also in their various roles of leadership within public services. I'm really excited for this celebration of International Women's Day. Mutual Ventures is doing a couple of things to really highlight the role that women are playing in leadership within public services. And today we are going to have a look at one of the other things that we did, which was a research report exploring some results that we got from a survey that we sent out. And it was a really interesting process, I think, for me, looking at what those results were and what it said about the progress and the achievements that women have made in public services. And also the way that we still have to go to really achieve true gender equality. The theme for this year's International Women's Day is Accelerate Action, and I think it really speaks to the fact that while tremendous progress has been made across all sectors, not just the public sector, there is still a good way to go to make sure that we achieve true equality in all senses of the word. And so we will be talking a little bit today about what some of those things are that we can do both within ourselves and within our organizations, but also to hear how our fantastic panelists have made their own way into those positions of leadership, overcoming, I'm sure, at times very challenging situations. What I'm going to do is just ask each of our panelists to briefly introduce themselves, and then we will have a quick look at those findings within the report before we get down to the main business of the day, which is a Q&A session with our wonderful panelists. So Donna, if I can come to you first, that would be great.
Yeah, hi. Thanks very much, Jordan, and well done for organising this. I think it's a brilliant session, and I'm honoured to be part of the panel. So my name's Donna Hall. I've been a local government chief executive. My most recent role in local government was at Wigan, where we created a partnership with citizens called the Wigan Deal that you may have heard about. I've since retired from public service, and I am now a non-exec with Mutual Ventures. Cheers.
Thank you so much. Judge Matthews?
Morning, everybody. Jill Matthews. Just want to echo what Donna said. It's great to be a part of this. I'm a circuit judge. I've been so for 14 years. I've been the designated civil judge for Teesside, for Cleveland South Durham, and also the designated family judge. And I now sit just as a family judge in the Court of Protection in Newcastle.
Thank you so much. Agata?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Agata Miszkowiec. I'm a managing consultant at Mutual Ventures and also a member of our leadership team. And I'm also absolutely thrilled to be here alongside such inspiring women. I had the pleasure of doing this research with Jordan, diving deep into realities of female leadership in public services. And it really is an honor to share our findings today and be a part of this important conversation.
Thank you so much, Agata. And Teresa?
Morning all. Yeah, happy International Women's Day. And what a great way to start the day, really. Just lovely to spend some time. There's a bit of us, isn't there, would like not to have an International Women's Day that's about campaigning, just about celebrating, but let's get on and see where we are with that.
Thank you so much. So what I will do is just get up a few slides. I promise it will not be death by PowerPoint today. It will very much be conversation based, but there was a few interesting stats that came out of that research paper that we really want to briefly address as part of today's session. Hopefully everybody can see that okay. So what we wanted to do as part of this paper was really to understand the perspectives and experiences of not just women, but men and women working within public services around what it means to be a woman in leadership. And I think by virtue of what public services are trying to achieve and the type of person that it tends to attract, we can see just from kind of pure stats that it has a disproportionate amount of women working within the workforce. And so it is something where the culture is ours to guide, but unfortunately there is still a disproportionate number of women not represented at a leadership position. And while we have some really fantastic male colleagues who, you know, are absolutely advocates and allies for both, you know, women and people of color, which is also a really important element of kind of diversity and intersectionality. It's something that still needs a lot of progress to get us where we need to be. So writing this report for me was really interesting. A lot of it was not surprising, but there was a couple of things that I learned along the way which really did surprise me. So just looking at that first slide, I'm going to hand over to Agata to comment on that.
Nearly half of our respondents said that their organization had a well-balanced representation of men and women in leadership. However, 27% noted that men still significantly outnumber women in senior roles. And this is, as Jordan said, despite the fact that many public services have a predominantly female workforce. So I think it does highlight the ongoing gap between representation at the frontline and leadership levels.
Thank you, Agata. This one, not surprising, but obviously very welcome. 89% agreed that female leaders offer unique perspectives that positively influence organizational culture and decision-making. I think you will see, you know, research after research paper has shown that diversity is a good thing, that it adds value to organizations, that diversity of perspective and opinion and background and culture and gender makes your organization more strong. It brings new ways of looking at the same problem. It brings perspectives to challenges that you might not have thought of if you had 10 of the same person sitting in the room. I think for me, growing up in South Africa and starting my career in South Africa, it was always really interesting how conversations around diversity were approached. And it was something that we were forced to have by the nature of what had come before, and it was something that you couldn't shy away from, and we needed to address as part of the reconciliation process. And it really encouraged people to have these conversations, and it's something that I think the UK has maybe not really stepped into in the same way, but to acknowledge that this diversity really can add strength to your organization when we see time and time again that that is the case, that people feel that way. And so it's really something to consider as a leader, how to bring that strength to your organization by having different types of people sitting in the room. And that could be about gender, it could be about, you know, socioeconomic background or ethnicity, whatever it is, you know, differences add value. So it was really great to see that stat coming through so clearly. We also looked at what people thought were the barriers to leadership roles for women. And as I said, not all of this is particularly surprising. So that first around cultural attitudes towards women in leadership, I think one of the things that really came through to me in that paper was when I was looking at the motherhood penalty. So I don't have any children, but, you know, I have kind of colleagues and family members who have had children while working, and it's a conversation that we've had, and it was always something I was aware of. But actually what I wasn't aware of was the fatherhood bonus. And so men who have kids while working actually experience on average an increase in their salary, and are seen as more perceptive and empathetic after having a child, whereas that exact same experience can have a negative impact on the woman's career. And I just thought that wasn't something I was aware of, and it was really interesting, and I think really speaks to kind of the cultural attitude towards women and how they are viewed, and that we have so many capable women who could really step up and bring value to those roles. We just need to kind of break down some of the structural and cultural barriers that are preventing them from doing so. We also saw that 20% of women of our respondents identified fewer women applying to leadership roles. And there is definitely something around imposter syndrome, which I know we like to talk about, but I'm not sure I love imposter syndrome as a reason for it. I think it kind of puts the onus back on women as if they need to be more confident off the back of by virtue of being in the room. And I think there is more to it than that. And as again part of the research for that report, I read that there was a event for women working in healthcare, and that they were asked about progressing into roles of leadership, and actually 25% of them said they had been discouraged from applying for leadership roles. And so I think there is a lot more to it than just women feeling like they couldn't do it, or maybe they might not be qualified. And so it's really important to unpack what that is and to help understand it so that we can address it structurally as well. And then lack of flexible working arrangements, and this was tied quite significantly to caring responsibilities, and we know that women disproportionately carry the responsibility for caring for family members, so sometimes parents, but mostly children. And so the lack of flexible working arrangements can prevent women from being able to do both, where they have a big job at home as well as at work. One of the other things that I found was really interesting was there was a study that showed that increased flexibility around working arrangements, including hybrid working, however, did have a negative impact in the sense that it meant that women were doing more of the work at home. Because they had that additional flexibility, they carried a greater kind of burden in heterosexual relationships than their partners did. So an upside, but also something to consider, again, how we deal with the cultural attitudes to the responsibility that women bear at home. And then finally, something I'm keen to talk about with our wonderful panelists, the absence of mentorship or sponsorship, particularly from women already in positions of leadership within their organizations, and what it means to have somebody to look up to and to kind of model yourself around, and the role that a mentor can play should never be underestimated. So as I said, interesting, not necessarily surprising, some of the stuff that was coming through there, but I learned a lot doing some of the research around this. So it was a fantastic personal experience, and hopefully something that people can learn from and help structure a bit of thinking around it as we're celebrating International Women's Day. So I'm going to stop sharing my slides, and I just wanted to ask, oh no, apologies, Agata, there is one more slide for me to show. Let me go back.
While Jordan is putting her slides back, I just wanted to say that overall, the reception to the survey was very positive. And also when we published the report, we heard many voices saying that it is both interesting and important conversation to be had. But there was one comment that we received from our survey respondents that really stopped me in my tracks. And you can see now this comment on your screens. And it said that this entire discussion is patronizing because leadership should be based on merit, not gender. And I personally love a good challenge to like this comment, because it really made me think, like, does a conversation about female leadership still matter in 2025? It's like legally there's no discrimination, and we do have incredible role models, female leaders at the very top of their respective fields, some of whom we're lucky to have here today. So is it even worth having this conversation? And is it patronizing to women to talk about female leadership as opposed to leadership in general? So I wanted to share my perspective on this, but I was also very interested in views of our panelists. I personally do agree that women should be leaders based on merit because of our skills, the vision we have, the impact we can make. But I also think that completely dismissing a conversation about female leadership, the barriers we're facing, what's holding us back, is premature, because the playing field still isn't level. And we've seen some of the barriers reported by our survey respondents as presented by Jordan now. And I think overall, 36% of our respondents said that they did experience bias in their workplace because of their gender. So whether it's the traditional roles and social expectations, sometimes maybe self-doubt or unconscious biases, these things still shape who gets opportunities. And there's quite a famous case study exploring the impact of unconscious bias when it comes to hiring women. And it actually comes from the field of classical music. For many years, until quite recently, major philharmonic orchestras were overwhelmingly male. And this is not because men are better musicians than women, but what we found is that it was because hiring committees unintentionally favored male candidates. And this was happening until they started doing blind auditions where musicians played behind a screen. And suddenly women were hired in far greater numbers. So the talent had always been there, just the process had to happen. And I think that with leadership, it's really no different. I truly believe in meritocracy, but to have a working meritocracy in place, we need to remove biases, whether they're seen or unseen, unconscious, that quietly filter out talent. And I think that women don't need handouts, but they do need systems that ensure talent isn't overlooked, maybe due to a career break, due to maternity, or some ingrained assumptions about who looks like a leader or who acts like a leader. So I very much welcome challenge and I'm open to the debate. But for me, the conversation about female leadership and what's holding us back isn't patronizing, because at its heart, it's about making sure leadership is truly open to all, based on talent and not outdated social roles or stereotypes. But as I said, I'm happy to be challenged on this.
Teresa.
I think Donna was before me, but I'll jump in.
Oh, apologies.
No, it's okay. If Donna's okay with that. So thank you so much, Jordan and Agatha. That's really a really helpful kind of run in. And I think there were so many things that were just pinging around my mind as you were talking around that. And I guess I do have that feeling of, wouldn't it be great just to be able to have a celebration and not continue to need to have the challenge session? But we are not in a place where we don't need to challenge, exactly as you're suggesting. It would be great if we really believed that women could simply be seen and recognised for who they are without having to, even in some of our reports, prove our worth. You know, even the concept of we can prove that EDI has impact. Well, we can. That's absolutely provable. I mean, the McKinsey report for 2024 talks about diversity can show to have 25% more impact upon your profitability. Right, so it's there, the proof's there, but we have to continue to prove it. Now, the moment we have to stop proving it means that we don't have to, because it's already there. We can take it as what is, in my opinion, a God-given right by being an equal member of humanity. But equity of opportunity is not there. So until it is, and until we're in a place where we're not seeing a decrease in female CEOs, so 28% in 2023 down to 19% in 2024, we're not going in the right direction. And we should be cautious about taking any comfort from the fact that things are worse over the pond, which we'll come to, I'm sure, but they're not okay here. And equity of opportunity is not here. So I make no apology for continuing to demand that women and women's leadership has its own place in conversation, just as for sure it's true for us. If you're a Black woman or disabled woman, your chances are even poorer. So let's not, I'm with you. I appreciate the challenge, but I make no apology for continuing to talk about the need to promote women and women in leadership.
Thank you, Teresa. Donna?
Yeah, I totally agree with Agatha and Teresa. Just to build on those points, not to make them again. I think things have got a lot worse. We've seen with the statements against diversity that Trump's made, we've seen international private sector companies drop their diversity targets, huge employers in this country and overseas. So it does have an impact on diversity. We've had last week a family member of a dead British female soldier said the British Army is not a safe place for women. You know, how on earth can the British Army not be a safe place for women? It's horrendous. So, and there are still more men called John running FTSE 100 companies than women. So, you know, it isn't a level playing field. I'm assuming the person who said it was already a female leader. And I think you've got to be a bit careful really with our views, because there's lots of people wanting to be female leaders, but they have huge number of barriers put in the way. So, you know, we've got to be thinking about how do we remove those barriers, all of us. But I totally agree with what's been said before.
Actually, one of the things that came out in the research was that difference of experience of women who were already in leadership roles and those who were in middle management, and either that for whatever reason the women who were in leadership had a good experience of their progression throughout their career, which is always absolutely what we're aiming for, or that they were underestimating maybe what their team were facing, but that it felt more challenging to obviously get where people were trying to go when you weren't there, and you felt more aware of it, and also that those who were at that level within the organization were more exposed to what their frontline team were facing and the barriers that they were facing, and they were more likely to hear about it day to day. And so the role or the responsibility of women who are already in leadership to make sure that they really understand what's happening in their organizations, and not just being told kind of secondhand through their team around them, but what does it mean to be a woman within that organization on the front line at your kind of middle management level, and what really are the challenges, and also to understand that everybody's experience will be different. Some teams will have a culture that will be preventative, and to make sure that kind of culturally and structurally that's unacceptable within your organization. How do you go about ensuring it? Because it's not an easy thing, particularly when you have a big organization. Judge Matthews.
I mean, we're fortunate at the moment to have a Lady Chief Justice, so that's a really, you know, shining example. But we've, you know, in the course of my career, we've come so far. So from when I started in 85, 86, you know, that were being cross-examined about, did I have a boyfriend? Was I going to get married, etc. And all of these questions should never have been asked. That doesn't happen anymore. But we've also gone through a phase where any woman who was promoted, you know, the comment amongst the men was, oh, she's only got it because she's a woman. I don't hear that anymore, fortunately, but I do feel that women in leadership roles, if anything goes wrong, they have undue criticism applied to them, which I think that wouldn't be attracted if it was a man in such a leadership role. So I think it's more unconscious now in my profession and in the law rather than overt. But it's still there. I mean, nobody wants to get a job and people think that they've only got it because they're a woman, for example. Everybody wants to be appointed on merit. But I think that unconscious bias is still there. And so that's why I agree with the others that, you know, we still need to keep fighting, in my view.
I think that's a really interesting point. And also the idea that if you are in a minority, you somehow are responsible, or you reflect any mistakes that your colleagues have made. So if there has been a mistake made, then it's, well, you see, this is why women shouldn't be in leadership roles. But if there is a positive thing, it's like, oh, well, she only got it because she's a woman. And that's obviously a really extreme example. But this idea that we're responsible for each other's mistakes, but we don't get to celebrate in each other's successes is incredibly frustrating. Fantastic. Well, that was really a really great start. So thank you all for your comments on that. It was really wonderful. I'm going to come to a few of our first questions, but what I would say is to anyone in the audience who's listening, please do use the chat function to submit any questions. We will save some time at the end for an opportunity to present your questions to our wonderful panelists. So there should be a Q&A function where you can submit your questions, and I will feed them to the panelists. If there's somebody specific you want to ask a question for, just pop it in the chat. Donna, if it's all right, I'm going to start with you. So you were recently recognised by the Local Government Information Unit as one of the top 25 thinkers in local government. My question was there a specific moment in your career or a particular decision that you took that, looking back, you can really kind of attribute to your success to?
Yeah, I think I definitely did have and have got imposter syndrome to this day. So it is a real thing. And it's actually, I don't know, I think sometimes when you have that lack of confidence, that view of yourself, and you question and you're constantly questioning what you do, rather than have that supreme confidence that a lot of men, sometimes who are very average at work, have this kind of sense of entitlement that they are amazing. And actually, you scrape beneath that veneer of confidence, it's not very good. The substance of what they do at work is not particularly great, but they fit the mold of what a leader looks like. And I remember going back in time, I worked at Salford, and there was an incredibly confident man who was going for a job just above me. And I was kind of beating myself up. Should I do it? Should I not do it? I had 2 young children. I was a single mum with 2 young children at the time. And I just thought, I'm not sure I can do it. But I had an incredible mentor who wasn't an official mentor, but a kind of informal mentor, another woman who really, really pushed me and helped me and got me into that feeling that I could do it. And I think that point about having a mentor, a coach, and women asking for someone to coach them, to mentor them. You know, I coach and mentor a lot of people now, both men and women, but I tend to find it's the men who come forward wanting the support more than the women. So sometimes I have to actively seek out the women and just say, can I help you? Because the talent, it's about the talent that's there. So in my experience, it was getting that job at Salford City Council, and that was my first kind of leadership role. And yeah, that was the point at which I kind of saw myself as a leader. I hadn't really thought of myself as a leader before. So it was a long, long time ago. My children were 2 and 4, and they're in the 30s now.
Do you think that moment then gave you the confidence to reach for the next step, that there was that recognition and that reassurance that I can do this, I am the right person for the job? Do you feel like that kind of compounded as you moved up?
Yeah, I've always had this thing driving me, which is I think a really essential thing about keeping it real, remembering how much money people pay in council tax. It's a huge proportion of people's expenditure. So this kind of drive to have good quality services, and thinking about how much my mum used to pay council tax, what proportion of her income that was. So that has always driven me. And I kind of, I suppose during my career, I saw people who weren't really bothered about citizens rise up the ranks in local government. You know, I had directors, not Teresa at all, she's amazing, but directors of children's services who kind of didn't really like children and didn't trust families. I'm sure you've come across people like that, Teresa. And because when you get to a senior level in a council, it's quite good money. I think you get increasingly people who are doing it for the money. So men and women, but that kind of drive to not let an idiot get a good job above me. I'm sorry to say it, but that's
you should put that on a poster, I think. I enjoyed that one.
But when people just don't really care about citizens, I just thought, I'm not having that. That's wrong. And it's that's always driven me. And that, to go onwards and upwards. Anyway, sorry, I shouldn't have said that.
No, I love that you did. I love that you did. As I said, I'll be getting that on a poster and sticking above my desk. Thank you so much. Teresa, I just wanted to come to you next, and it's something that you have briefly touched on, but I was wondering if you could share a bit more of your thoughts on it. So unfortunately, not just with the result of the US election, but there has been a growing trend internationally, but With the election of Trump into office, we have seen a growing trend around DE&I initiatives being rolled back. And I can feel myself getting angry just talking about it, but I won't. And I just wanted to ask you for your thoughts on really what role do you think diversity plays in the workplace? How do we advocate for other women, but also, as you mentioned, people from different ethnic backgrounds with different disabilities and abilities? How do we make sure as an organization and as a leader that we protect the initiatives that encourage diversity in leadership and throughout the organization as we see this kind of unfortunate trend?
Yeah, thank you. And it's really hard, isn't it, just not to get overwhelmed with the fury. And I think we all feel that. And of course, the reason it's so important we don't is that takes us away from actually being able to organize and to collaborate effectively and to really think about how we attack this huge rise in misogyny that's across the world. And it is absolutely embodied in people who are sitting in certain chairs that they don't have the right and privilege to, as far as I'm concerned, sit in, but they're in there. And I was just thinking, as Donna was talking about, where does that kind of sense of needing to feel that you have to, it's not for me, it has never been a choice around, oh, I'd like to be a leader. It's just this sense of being propelled into. And part of that comes from my own cultural background, for sure. And I think I did just want to acknowledge that some of the better champions and the most fabulous supporters I've have been men. Not all women have been a great supporter, and I think we need to be really open and honest about that. Not all women hold other women up, and not all men pull up the rope bridge. So there's something about kind of where do we kind of get to that place of understanding how we support those that support others, and be mindful about how that is. And my own father's an Irish immigrant to this country. Really, 6 daughters, 1 son, but the 6 daughters were driven to be leaders with a strong message which said, you have to be better than, okay? Absolutely riven with that. You have to be better than the next person because you are both Irish and a woman. A great strength of understanding from his point of view about that meant you had to be better and better. And clearly, if you're a Black woman, if you're a disabled woman, if you're a woman of diversity that is not in that present time, whatever that present time is acceptable to those great people sitting on those great chairs, you consider and realise and exist in a place where you have to be better than just to have the same equity of opportunity. And that's appalling. And we know that it's not just about opportunity, because what we actually know is going on is that we've got weakness that is being displayed as strength. We've got weakness that is being displayed as veracity. We've got weakness that is being displayed as force. And I have real grave concerns when I think about 42 years now in children's services. Violence begets violence. Hatred begets hatred. That issue around seeing Jess Phillips standing in the front benches yesterday, taking over 5 minutes to read out the names of the women who have been murdered by men this year. 5 minutes. If we are kidding ourselves that our children, our girls and our boys, and I suppose I do remain absolutely riven, as Donna was talking about in terms of our people in our space, but the more and more fabulous family I have. So I have a lovely family of children, and I now have a lovely family of grandchildren, boys and girls. And I don't want to see those boys or those girls dripped in the toxic masculinity. When I see Andrew Tate even being on our screens, I have an absolute sense of we cannot stop this fight. We are so far away. So in some ways, I do feel that EDI has become not impactful enough in the way that others are saying about it, but we are in a worse position. We're about basic life. We're about basic opportunity. Women having basic control over their own bodies is being eroded in ways that we've never seen before. So we are actually in a fight for our boys' lives. We're in a fight for our girls' lives. And we're in a fight to make sure that that thing that is presented as strength is understood as weakness and is faced into that. No appeasement. facing into that horrible weakness that is pouring toxicity onto my grandchildren, I could become more indignant than I ever have done before, and the children of the world who don't have the power that we have. So I consider myself the person who must step in, who must stand up, and must be able to be understanding that absolute issue about gender-based violence, which is damaging so much in our society, will only be managed down and away when misogyny is managed down and away. They are on that same ladder, you know, that low-level misogynistic banter that we know is the first step often on being able to identify people who are not being supportive and developmental of women in a wider way, is sadly on the same ladder as rape as a crime against humanity in war. And we know those issues need to be dealt with and thought of in the same way. Now, in many ways, the EDI policies and procedures that we see around the world don't help us to have those discussions. And whilst I welcome and will continue to support them in the workplace to make sure that we have that equity of opportunity, I actually think we now need to move our conversation into a very much more challenging space around we have to reclaim. I don't want my children having a breakfast, lunch and dinner of porn and violence and misogyny in everything that they're seeing and doing and hearing on you know, whatever screens they are or whatever conversations that have been had. And I think we have to genuinely stand up against. I don't agree with the principle that misogyny isn't an act of terror. I think it's the biggest act of terror that we're facing down. I think it's the biggest, you know, if we treated the violence against women and girls as we treated COVID, we would have a completely different response to how we do this stuff. I don't think I'm answering the question at all, Jordan, but you must have pressed a button in me that absolutely made me feel that absolute sense of EDI is crucial. But we're kind of having the wrong conversation against this warmongering drive of misogyny.
No, I really appreciate that response. And it reminded me of a conversation I had recently with a friend of mine. Well, it can't have been that recent, but after Roe v. Wade was overturned in the US, and we're having that conversation, and there was somebody made a comment about, oh, well, you know, it'll never happen here, thankfully. And I just remember being really incensed by that comment, because I'm pretty sure people in America thought that, the women in America thought that. And you can feel the change happening with these conversations. You can feel the growing tension. You can feel this move towards everything is an argument and a fight, and there is no middle ground, and there's no debate to be happened. That, you know, you're with us or you're against us. And actually, there are loads of men who are allies and who do want to protect, you know, women within their personal lives and their professional lives. But we need to start having these conversations legitimately, rather than this your perspective, my perspective, and that's it. We need to bring people into the conversation and have a legitimate conversation about what's happening to culture within this country. We need to understand that things were exacerbated by the last election, where we were trying to run an election based on culture issues rather than economic and policy issues, because nothing had gone right for the last however many years. And you can feel that. And so I really appreciate that answer, and I think it's hopefully given everyone a lot to think about. And I know that this is something I think about a lot. So I appreciate that answer a lot. Thank you, Teresa. On that, Judge Matthews, if I can come to you, I know that at an earlier point within your career, you were one of only 2 female designated civil judges. And I'd be really interested in hearing about your experience of working in a male-dominated industry at that point in your career, but also your experience of male allyship and the role that they could play to lift you up.
Sure. Go ahead and just say something about Roe versus Wade. Just before the Queen died, I was supposed to go to America to, it was a sort of judicial exchange, and we were going to have dinner at the Supreme Court. And I've got 2 daughters who had said, you know, you must tackle them about Roe versus Wade over dinner. And I was just wondering how I was going to frame this politely, but I'm afraid the Queen died and then the trip was cancelled. So I was spared having to take on the Supreme Court judges in America about how on earth they could allow this to happen. So, but in terms of something that Teresa was saying about being supported by men, I would just like to say that, you know, during the course of my career, sadly I've had few, you know, female mentors. And that's been really disappointing. And I think, you know, when I started in Chambers in 1986, I was the only woman. And then, because at that time they used to think, well, we've got one, we don't need another one. But fortunately, another one did come along not before too long. And she was always a great, you know, chum and support. We supported each other. But more senior women were terrifying, and they were really quite negative. And I have found actually the men in my career more supportive, which is why now I want to support young women coming through. And that's a really important thing for me. As designated civil judge, that's not a job I applied for. I'd only been a judge for a couple of years, and there was an emergency in that the person who was holding that role, who sadly was the man who trained me to be a barrister, was sacked by the senior presided judge because he'd said something he didn't like. And so I had to step in as an emergency, and I hadn't practiced in civil work for over a decade at that point. So I was sitting as a criminal and a family judge. But, you know, as a public servant, and I think, you know, we just heard really earlier about how important from Donna, you know, the concept of public services. You want to, you know, do things for people. I had to manage all of the civil cases that were coming into the court, from multi-million-pound claims to small claims. All of those are important to people. So I had to make sure they were going to be managed properly. I couldn't ask my my pupil master who'd just been sacked, because that was a bit, you know, insensitive. So I had to reach out to other men who were in my region for support, and they were all really helpful, I have to say. Obviously, there was an element of mansplaining at times. I was patronised at times. And, you know, you have to play to men's vanity at times. And that was a way of getting things out of them. They were supportive, I have to say. And that helped me carry out that really important and challenging role. I was leading a team of judges who were also mainly men. And so I was across that work, that I could cope with it. And that was really important. Otherwise, it would disincentivize them, and they would lose heart in how the civil work was being managed at the court. So it was really important to find out how work was managed at other courts, and then try and implement that in a sensible, coherent way in my court and across the region. And I have to say, I felt more supported in that role by the other male judges than I did perhaps as a designated family judge, where there were more women. And the point that I want to make about that is, I think that in the world that we have, which Teresa's just been speaking very powerfully about, women do need to support each other. And at times, I think women can be terribly competitive with each other, and that is not helpful. I think you need to look to other women, see the positives in them and help them. And it is only by doing that we will advance our cause, not fighting with each other. Men do stick together better than we do at times. And I think that is something that we all need to learn. And I think it's better now in my profession, but there's still can be quite an element of competition between women, which is unhelpful and unnecessary. And it's not advancing our cause, if I can call it that way. And, you know, I'm trying to foster a greater cooperation between women in my profession, to value each other and to help each other to move on.
Thank you. That's really interesting. And I think the thing that really struck me was the kind of juxtaposition between what you said at the beginning, which was, well, we had one female judge, so, you know, we've got it covered, and luckily more have come in. And also how that like structural and cultural view of women in leadership, and well, we've got one, so do we need another? And, you know, being held responsible for each other's actions has probably compounded this idea of female competition, because there weren't that many spaces at the top. And so rather than competing with each other to get to that one space, which is a fallacy, there's not one space, we've worked together to create more space at the top for other women. And I think that's really the role that mentorship and leadership can play. So it's really fantastic to hear that that's what you're doing in your career. And I know that it's something for those who are, trying to find the courage and direction to move up in our career, that mentorship plays a massive role. So it's really appreciated. We have a question from the audience that I would like to come to just off the back of your response, Judge Matthews, and this is open to any of the panelists, but what more can men do to provide an alternative role models to the likes of Andrew Tate and Trump, especially as so many young boys and men are finding their anti-woke narrative so appealing? How do we make the type of behavior we want to see more attractive to young boys and men in the age of social media? So that's an audience question, and I'm very happy to open that up to everyone. I know we've briefly touched on it across a few answers, but I think the bit I'd like to focus on in that question is what really can men do, the men that are allies, to help women, but also to help other men to move away from that, which research shows is a lonely place. That kind of far right macho Andrew Tate mentality is lonely, it's isolating, and it's not good for men's psyche. And so how do we help them move away from that? Teresa?
Yeah, thank you, and thank you for the question. I think there is something about us needing to together expose the genuine weakness behind such right-wing behaviours. And of course, what Andrew Tate and others have done, Trump and Musk and others, have surrounded themselves with the world's wealth and riches, and therefore said that equates. And that's what I think boys are particularly hearing. And we know that we haven't been speaking well enough to our poor boys in particular, who don't see the opportunities for themselves in life. So I think the issue we have, and it's across the whole of this conversation really, is that however hard we might try in small places and however wide we might like to think our influence is, we're working in a massive system which is actually not paying attention to the fact that there are a vast number of poor boys now in particular who cannot see a way forward.
Oh dear, I think we may have briefly lost Teresa. Give her a minute to see if she can reconnect, just to check that that's frozen for the other panelists. Is that right? Yeah.
Yes.
Teresa, I'm not sure if you can hear us, but we've lost you in the middle of what was, I suspect, going to be a very, very interesting answer. So that is a shame. Hopefully Teresa can reconnect and we can come back to that answer, because I'm keen to hear what that was. But while we wait, I do want to come to Agatha with a question. And it's really around what the best career advice that you've ever received is, and what career advice would you like to pass on?
Thank you, Jordan, and I'll come to this question shortly, but wanted to comment very quickly on the question from the audience. I think it's quite a complex issue, but I think sometimes we focus our conversation on those negative examples of people like Trump, like Andrew Tate. But I think we should still recognize that they are the minority. So I think we should also be talking about those men who, as we said, are allies, who support women, who support people with protected characteristics, who care deeply about the diversity, so that the conversation is also positive, and young boys can have those positive role models. And sometimes I feel, and it's also part of the media, that the narrative focuses on those negative examples, but we maybe lack those positive examples. And I think there's also a role for other men to call out behaviors or comments that are not acceptable. And these are relatively small things, but I think it actually matters if in conversations, in your workplace, with your friends, with families, if you hear something that you don't agree with, just say that it's wrong. And in terms of the best advice that I've ever received, I think I was quite fortunate to have on my path some really inspiring women who shared with me their wisdom, experiences, not necessarily in formal mentoring capacity, but even in informal conversations that I was having. And one of the best pieces of advice I received was from a person who some of you may know as the former directors of children's services in London's Triborough, Claire Chamberlain. And I worked with Claire on a project, so she got to know me quite well. She knew my strengths, she knew my weaknesses, and she told me, just be yourself. Know what you bring to the table, be authentic, even if it means being different. And that advice has really stayed with me. And at Mutual Ventures, I know I'm quite different to my colleagues on the leadership team, not only in terms of my gender, age, background, even accent, but also a slightly different perspective that I bring, like one that I think focuses more on people's well-being, perhaps more conciliatory, more nurturing. But I think these differences make us a better team. But I also would want everyone to recognize that the things that I've mentioned are not just soft skills that are nice to have, that they are actually foundation of strong, effective leadership. And when I think about the leaders I admire most, we've had like some negative examples today, but I also wanted to mention those positive. I think for me, it's Jacinda Ardern, and she demonstrated leading New Zealand that you can lead both with compassion and decisiveness. Because let's be also honest, like sometimes being a leader means like having to make some like tough choices, but you can still be a person who listens, who builds relationships, who creates an environment where people feel valued and nurtured. And as Teresa mentioned before, research backs this up, and we have quite a lot of research now that empathetic leaders build stronger, more resilient teams. I think workplaces that prioritize care, inclusivity, have lower turnover, higher staff engagement, and overall better outcomes. And in our report, we had a very interesting case study of possibilities, an all-female-led social enterprise, which is a brilliant example of this in action. And I know that Donna probably would be able to say more about them as she's serving as Possibilities Chair. But for me, that was the best advice I got. Don't try to mimic others. Even very successful leaders around you, just be yourself. And for me, this is about sticking to my values.
Thank you, Agata. That's really appreciated. And Agata is my manager at work and has been since I joined Mutual Ventures, and I can definitely speak to the approach that you come to from like a mentoring, but also having worked with you on projects, a leadership perspective, that balance between kind of empathy and also just being incredibly good at what you do has been really, really inspiring, and it's always meant a lot to me to work with you. So I just wanted to share that. The time is really flying, so I had a few more questions for everybody, but unfortunately, I'm not sure we're going to get through them. So what I'd like to do instead is just ask a question, and I'll come to each of the four of you for a brief answer, but it's really around what's the one thing either to consider, to think about, or to implement in their own career, whether it's a man or a woman listening to this today, that you would like them to take away around confidence and allyship and really respect for what we all do. So just really that one thing that you'd like everybody here today to take away. Donna, can I come to you first?
Yeah, brilliant. And can I also big up Agatha? She's amazing, and she's brought such incredible wisdom and strength to the Mutual Ventures management team. She's amazing. So yeah, I think it's what Agatha said earlier on. It's about tapping into the essence of you, not trying to be something, a leader, what a leader looks like, put that mask on of leadership. Really tap into the essence of you, your values, what really drives you, what motivates you. As I said before about thinking about my mum, that's what motivates me. I want to do the best I can for my amazing mum. And I think don't try to be like a man because you see men in leadership roles. Just be true to yourself. That's what Rachel Law has done at Possibilities. She's incredible. I love working with her and her all-female management team. She is an inspiration. They're quirky. They've got a happiness manifesto. You don't see that in very many organizations. Incredible turnover in last year, profits, huge amount of profit, which is then plowed back into supporting people with learning disabilities and our incredible staff. So yeah, it is that blend of compassion and being an amazing leader is not, this kind of stuffed shirt type of, it's being authentic. I think it's about authenticity.
Thanks, Donna. I loved speaking to Rachel as part of that report. It was so fantastic to hear their approach and Possibilities, an amazing organization. Judge Matthews.
Well, I just want to pick up on what Donna was saying earlier, because I have to say I still suffer with an imposter syndrome. So this morning I'm thinking, why am I on this panel? But, it's about trying to be humble, but also because I think that women do think when they're thinking about applying for a job, oh, but I can't do, all of those things that are on the job spec. Men don't think like that. They think, oh, well, I can do 2 of those, that's enough. So then they go for it. And I think that's the problem between men and women, and why women don't go for leadership roles. They need to concentrate on their positives. They need somebody to point out to them that they are ready for it, because sometimes you don't think you are. And I used to say, oh, well, I'm only quite junior. And then somebody would say, oh, you're not very junior, you should go for it. And that's what I say to people, mainly women now. No, I think you should try for this role. Really go for it. You don't know, if you're not in it, you can't win it. And going back to Donna's phrase earlier, don't want that idiot brackets man getting that job when you could have gone for it. So I think I want to inspire people to aspire and to concentrate on the positives. Don't think, oh, but I can't do this and that and the other. Think, no, but I can do these things. And also that you will learn on the job. I have changed so much from when I started being a leadership judge to now. I'm a different person, and you will learn on the job. You will find things in yourself which you will be able to develop, and you will be able to grow as a person and improve. I'm trying to improve. I'm trying to be the best judge I can be by the time I retire. So don't hold back. Think about it. Ask some advice from somebody you respect, and then go for it. But don't wait. I waited too long to apply to be a KC. I got there in the end, but I should have been one much earlier. So don't hang about. Don't undermine yourself. Be positive and go for it. And remember, you don't want that idiot getting the job, as Donna said.
Thank you so much, Judge Matthews. We actually had a comment from the audience, which was around a webinar on imposter syndrome. And in the webinar, they said, most people have imposter syndrome, and those who don't are usually imposters, which I thought was quite nice. Agatha, can I come to you, please?
I don't want to repeat what's already been said, but I think from my perspective, it's really, the network is really important. So surround yourself with people who uplift, but also very importantly, who challenge you. So find people who care enough about you to tell you what you're doing well, but also what you need to do to challenge yourself more, even if sometimes it's uncomfortable.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And Teresa, with 1 minute to go, I'd like to come to you either on that question or any final thoughts that you'd like to share.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Great conversation. So any equal society must begin with children. and they must begin with children being at the heart of what we do. So I'm suggesting that we talk and value our boys with emotional intelligence. We talk and value those kind of conversations to make sure that we really engage them in being the fantastic men of the future. And I think equally in the workplace, we need to make sure that those value bases exist and are allowed to exist. And I've been an only, as I was just hearing Jill talking about her own experience of being an only in a team. And that team had a WhatsApp group that was called "What Cufflinks Should We Wear Today?" If that's not a microaggression, I'm not sure what is. So there was something about, how do you call out that bullshit? How do you call that out? And actually we have to do that by holding tight to our own values and really making sure that we tolerate, we intolerant, refuse to tolerate that misogynistic language, refuse to tolerate that kind of banter. And then at the same time, I would absolutely support, and I guess it took me a few years to learn to say yes, to rather than to think, oh, I must just hold back, to actually jump off that cliff. And I don't know if I can do it or not. That's not the point. I don't need to know if I can do it. And I had a fantastic female mentor once who said to me the day after I had been appointed to a job that I knew I couldn't do, and it was the first time I had taken myself off that cliff, who said to me, just so you know, I know you can't do this yet, and that's why I appointed you. And I've taken that with me everywhere, because actually that's what I want in my people too, somebody who's not yet able to completely do the job. So actually seeing that as a strength, and women are better at that, because we know we're constantly leaning into our lives, which are complex and multi-layered, knowing I don't know how I'm going to get through this one, but we get through it. So remember that, say yes, and know that we'll come out the other side stronger together.
Thank you so much. And really, really fantastic closing remarks. We are at 1 minute past, so I'll wrap us up very quickly, but just to say thank you so much to the four of you. It's been a really fantastic conversation. I personally have enjoyed it so much, and we'll definitely be picking up on some of the points that we've raised for the conversation. And thank you for everybody who attended and took the time to listen to what we spoke about today. And just to close off by saying Happy International Women's Day for tomorrow. And I hope everybody has a great weekend when it comes. Thank you all.
Well done, Jordan. Well done.
Well done. Thank you, Jordan.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.